One people, it's week 11 of our sofa session. Today, we're talking about men. And our special guest this morning, he's a footballer, he's a leader, he's a father, he's a husband, he's a top bloke. It's our very own ginger giant. So please give it up for Mr. Dan Owen.
Morning, Evs.
What's happening, mate?
Good, thanks, mate. Good to be here on the sofa with you.
Oh, yeah. It's all good. Is you all good at your end in Hackney?
It's all good over here, mate.
Good.
All good. Although I did fancy being on that beach.
Oh, yeah, telling me. Mind you, it looked a bit cold.
Yeah, it's true.
See, I remember when you and Roz first came to East End Church, and you know, some people, they kind of tuck away and they blend into the crowd trying to be unnoticed, but at 7 foot something and of course in the same race as Ronald McDonald, Kieran and the Weasleys, yeah, being ginger and all that, you definitely didn't blend in. So what's your experience of church, and what did you think of East End Church when you first came to us?
Okay, mate. Well, just to give a little bit of background to me as well, I grew up on the Essex coast. I became a Christian when I was 8 years old in a VW camper van on the M25. And so at the age of 11, actually lost my mum after quite a short battle with cancer. So I had siblings, but they had all moved out by that point. So it was kind of just me and my dad on our own. And actually, my dad was kind of thrown into being a parent quite quickly and pretty much fed me Bernard Matthews turkey burgers, which full of all their GM products. My sisters reckon that's why I'm a giant, because I'm the only big person in my family. So, Evs, a little recommendation for you there, mate. Why don't you give turkey burgers a little try? Try and break that 5 foot mark. But for me, church was, you know, it was a massive help for me growing up at that age, losing my mum, because in church, you know, there were quite a lot of ladies there that were really sort of like mother figures to me. It was a big help. And also there was a chap in church that became like a big brother to me. So my big brother moved out, went off to uni, and then pretty much never saw him again. I got a great relationship. But there was another guy within that church who really sort of inspired me in my faith and made church something that I really wanted to be a part of. And for me, by the grace of God, you know, not being a part of a church has never crossed my mind. However, it's been frustrating to see lots of my mates that used to be part of church, that were part of church, kind of stopping coming to church. And I've seen that happen more than the rate of guys actually joining the church. Mm-hmm. And I think through my experience of church, to be honest, I've been part of quite a few churches when I've lived in various places around the UK. There haven't been a lot of them that I've really felt comfortable and confident bringing my bloke friends along to, you know. I brought a guy along to one church once, and he said to me, he said, all the blokes here are really feminine. And I was quite shocked by that. And a lot of the guys that I have brought along to church have never really come back a second time. That bloke never came back, but that's because he got arrested a few days later and given a life sentence. So you never know. He may have come back. But he can't for a while. But it came to the point when we were looking to join another church in London. We had to move churches for like practical reasons, and we were looking locally, and there were we had quite a small list of things we were looking for a new church. We wanted one that was Jesus centered, one that was local, and we both really needed and wanted some Christian friends. And for me particularly, I'd been living in London for 7 years at that point, and really the only friends that I had were a couple of colleagues and mates that I knew from back home. So I was really craving some Christian men to call my friends. And then we found out about East End Church, which we were shocked about because we'd lived locally for quite a while and hadn't stumbled across it. So we went along to try it out, and I remember, you know, Benita and Rachel really welcoming us at the door with big beaming smiles, and coming in and just being really surprised at how many blokes there were. And I sat down next to this sort of caveman looking guy, and it turned out he was the leader of the church. And and it was just brilliant. Amazingly, I'd met Carl Bodacker just 10 days before when he came to do some work on my house. Got to know him and found out he was a Christian. Then saw him at that church that Sunday as well. But, I wasn't going to let that put me off. And we thought, but actually, Carl was actually become a real friend and an answer to that prayer of wanting to meet guys. I remember chatting to you, Evs, that Sunday morning, and you were telling me about like the boxing events that you did and just all these guys that I could really relate to. Des, Nick and Sean, they started coming out and playing football at an event that I was helping run. So got to know them really quickly and really well. And it's brilliant. Like so much stuff for blokes going on, men's breakfasts and things like that. And then a real kind of test for me was I brought a guy along to East End Church about a month later, and he turned up, and I didn't know this, but he brought along his girlfriend and his daughter, and they didn't just come back a second and a third time. They ended up joining the church, which was absolutely amazing. So, for me, looking for a church, and we did visit a few other churches, so it wasn't just that I was used to going to churches. East End Church, right across the board, everyone made us feel really welcome, and like we've absolutely loved being part of the church.
That's brilliant. How long ago was that now then?
That's about so it was just before Ezra was born, so it's coming up to 6 years.
Right, okay. Cool. You're part of the furniture, mate.
Right, mate.
What would you say to men of this generation, Dan?
So I was thinking about this, and I think it really would be for blokes to be a voice of encouragement to one another. I love to have banter. I spend most of my life around the football culture where, loads of banter, but I think having a laugh amongst blokes is important, but I really think that it's important for blokes to be encouraging one another, or as the Bible sort of talks about, is building one another up. Just calling out the potential in people and like affirming one another. And I think that's something that, blokes could do more right across the board and sort of in the workplace. And something that really jumped out at me a little while back was how Jesus, before he did one miracle, before he went into the ministry, when he was baptized, his Father in heaven said in an audible voice so that everyone could hear, he said, "This is my son who I love. In him I'm well pleased." And that was, and I think that's a big reason why Jesus was just so secure in who he was, because, his Father was like just confirming his identity, just revealing how much he loved him and like affirming him and just how pleased he is in him. And I think blokes, really value one another, but I think we could probably say it a bit more. And I think that might have an impact on like the shocking rates of like mental health amongst men and suicide amongst men, because, words are really powerful. And I want to shout out to the ladies in East End Church as well, because they're so encouraging. I've been encouraged so much by the ladies in East End Church, so I'm really thankful to them. But just, I think I'd say to the men, let's be encouraging and building one another up.
Yeah, brilliant. And then following on from that, then what would you specifically say to people, well, to men within the East End Church?
Yeah, so I'd say to men, realise just what a role model you can be. I think I'd love to see blokes in East End Church be more connected as well, and to kind of rub off, the good that's in them. I read a quote the other day. It said that the less good men in your life, the more you look to culture for role models and affirmation. And I think it'd be really sad if we had like men in East End Church that are surrounded by so many other good men, but are actually looking outside to culture to be like men. So, for me, growing up, this fella I mentioned called Mark, for me, he was a real role model. And in many ways, he taught me how to be a man. He taught me in like, he told me you don't need to go chasing lots of relationships, Dan. Just like, God will bring someone along for you. He taught me woodwork. He taught me to support the best team, Arsenal. And in many ways, he taught me that. But actually, since being at East End Church, it's people like you, Evs, and, Des and Tom, Fraser, Steve, that have taught me how to be a dad, how to be a good husband, And that's looking to you guys as being role models, being around the likes of Carl Bodecker, who's taught me to be more of an evangelist, and Mark Hendry, who's taught me to care less about what people think of me. and and Dutnall about, how to, really be a good husband, and loads of other guys. And, if you've got something of Jesus in you, you can be a role model to people. And there's guys, the single fellas as well, really inspire me in my walk with God. So I guess what I'd say to East End Church is, God backs you, He's for you. You can really inspire other people, help other guys to get closer to God, and just, to realise that and try and be a bit more connected. And as we come out of lockdown, I'm hoping that we can see more sort of men's events within the church happening, and see guys have opportunities to mix a bit more and to really sort of spur one another on. And if for any guys that are watching this today and you feel like you don't have a role model, reach out to another guy in the church. Say, look, do you want to come and watch a football match with me? Do you want to go and come play a computer game with me, or hit some golf balls, something like that? Spend some time with other godly men, and back yourself to be, a real role model to other guys too.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, thanks very much for that, Dan. And, next week we'll be out of lockdown, and so we'll be able to gather a bit more together over the coming months and stuff like that. And so I'm sure the men's events that we put on together, you guys support there, that we'll be able to, have a lot more going on and gathering people. So please, as Dan says, get connected with that if you're a fella there. But that's brilliant, Dan. I've got some nuggets there, especially the Bernard Matthews one. So
give it a try.
Ordering some stuff, but when we come offline now. So you're a top bloke, mate. Thanks very much for that. Thanks very much, Dan. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks, Evs. Appreciate it, boys. Really good. Really good. And as you know, Dan, well done. We look to you as a role model, mate. I think you put your money where your mouth is. It's great. And it is weird, let's face it, to know what it is to be a man these days. In modern culture particularly, men are asked to be something impossible. They're asked to be really caring but really decisive. They're meant to be well-groomed but don't use too much product. They're meant to be cordon bleu chefs but able to change a car tyre. They must be sensitive but thick-skinned. They must be able to change a nappy and bench press their own body weight. They're able to listen but not have too strong opinions. But you ask 100 different women or people down the street what a man should be, you get 100 different answers. You get 100 different answers. And there's very, very few good examples of what it is to be a man. In fact, they're more, unicorns are probably more common than the men that are willing to stand up and say, follow me. The Apostle Paul, he did that. If we look in 1 Corinthians 4, I'm just going to read out some verses, and I'm going to be a little bit all over the place today, but I've got loads to say to blokes that I feel passionately about, but I'm going to root it in some verses. So 1 Corinthians 4 says this. He says, I'm writing this not to shame you, but to warn you as my dear children. Even if you have 10,000 guardians in Christ, you do not have many fathers. For in Christ Jesus, I became your father through the gospel. Therefore, I urge you to imitate me. Paul was able to say, listen, follow me as I'm following Christ. It wasn't like just kind of, oh, look over there. It's like, I'll take responsibility. I'm standing up, and he's encouraging guys. And as we said last week, men and women are created different. We just are. And right through the Bible, we see that men and women are treated different. We see that there's no female priests in the temple. We see that, men don't give birth. We know from, just naturally that generally speaking, men are able to carry physically more weight. And yet women are able to carry many more things in their head than a man is, and we've got different outlooks on life and different ways we do stuff. If I go out to a boxing match, I'll come back and Rach says, what did you talk about? we don't talk. We watch the boxing. We're on a mission. We can't multitask. You know, that's what we're doing. It's like, and women are kind of made with more of an ability for relationship and caring for one another. Blokes are purposeful. Women, when they greet each other, it's kind of face to face. It's over coffee. It's chatting. When blokes are face to face, often that's a confrontational situation. We like to do things shoulder to shoulder, like play football, or watch something, or whatever. We're different. I've been, I've learned with daughters growing up. There's a vulnerability, a physical vulnerability that women feel when they walk down the street on their own. But men, they walk down the street on their own, and every time a bloke goes out the door, in his mind, he's thinking, I might be in a confrontation today. I wonder if I'm going to get into a fight today. And it's just that kind of mindset of you've got to have your guard up and have your wits about you. We are created different and do life different. Now, the thing is, and something that's been sort of said to me that I might have overemphasised because of some of the things that Dan has said, but it's what you do as a man it's not what you do as a man that makes you manly. It's you are manly, and therefore the things you do are manly. Okay, it's not. It's what you do that becomes manly. Okay, not what you do that makes you manly. That means that you could be like a cage fighting coal miner that shoots bears as a hobby, or a stamp collecting florist who knits booties for kittens. If you're a man and you're doing it, that's a manly thing. And you need to express your manhood in whatever your hands are finding to do. It's not like this is what a man does, this is what a woman does. It's like you be a man, you inhabit your manliness. And that means that a so-called man's man is as important, and these principles that I'm going to go through are as relative for a man's man as it is to a more creative or caring man with that kind of disposition. But the truth is, generally speaking, there is a great lack of men in church, represented in church. Sorted Magazine did a street survey a few years ago, and basically the findings were that in the main, men think that Christianity is for wimps, for women, and irrelevant. It found out that men are more comfortable walking into a woman's underwear shop than they are walking into a church. We as Eastern Church are wanting to change the salvation history of our generation here in the East End. And we want to reach all of the East End, not just the blokes. But the fact is, if you, research has shown that if you want to reach the whole family, you do it better by reaching the blokes. So statistically, if you get a kid to come to church, you are at 3.5% of the time, the rest of the family will come. If a woman starts coming to church, then you have a 17% chance that the rest of the family come. But if you have a man that comes to church, a father that comes to church, there's a 93% chance that the rest of the family will come. Basically, if you get the dad, you get the whole family. We are passionate about reaching out to men. I've got personal prophetic things of the type of blokes that God has given me faith for, but we want to reach out to men. And what I do want to call out for the remainder of this message is some of the weaknesses that we see in men, and therefore give us strategies to go about reaching out to them. We see two main weaknesses in men. We see that their weaknesses is expressed through bullying or passivity. I'm going to read another verse from 1 Corinthians 13. It says this: when I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. There is a massive difference between being male and being a man. Okay, I am, so Moses physically has similar things to me in my house, but he's not a man. He's 1 year old, and it's like there is. I'm just calling out bullying. I'm not going to go into that majorly because it's pretty pathetic. But when a sign of weakness in a guy is when he has to intimidate either physically or with his mouth, with his loudness or whatever. It's like it's bullying, and when that's left unchecked, we get situations like Harvey Weinstein or Sarah Everard, where guys have used their kind of stature or authority to abuse and that is not an impressive thing, and I'm calling that out. That's bullying. That is bullying, and it's a sign of weakness. But I think more pervasive in society is passivity. It's something in man that shows weakness and immaturity that is just needs calling out for what it is. It's immaturity. You see, men lead whether they try to or not. And they can lead either in good, positive ways or in unhelpful, negative direction. That's why Adam was held responsible for sin. You see, Eve was created second, yet she defied the created order and led Adam into sin, if you like. But Adam did lead, but he led through passivity. It was like, oh, well, yeah, whatever, you do it, dear. And he did lead, and God held him responsible. There was no kind of getting away with it. He saw through all the excuses and says, Adam, you're responsible. You see, we live in a society where we're surrounded by men that are bored. That they're just kind of, and a bored man is a dangerous man. A dangerous man. You see it in fathers, you know, like, our kids are growing up in one of the most hostile environments towards the gospel. Seriously. And you know, we can't, as fathers in the church, in Eastern Church, we can't just sort of hope that they're going to grow up and turn out all Christian. We've got to be proactive with it. We cannot be passive about raising our kids. You see, fathers, I'll tell you, you are bringing up your kids. You are bringing up your kids. And whether you're doing that in a positive way or whether you're just sitting back and being passive, your kids are following you and you are affecting them. You're not on the bench. You're not waiting to get involved in the fight. You're in the fight. You're just not doing it very well, some of you. And some of you actually are doing blinded and proactive and raising your kids. You have, as me, the most influential role to play in your family. You have the most influential role to play in society. You have the most influential role to play in church. In fact, you show me a community in the world where there's poverty, where there's sin, where there's broken relationships and stuff like that, and I will show you a place where men are not stepping up and taking responsibility. So how do we get maturity? In men, you see, there is a difference. There's maturity. You see, this is... Let me try and define what maturity is in a man. Okay, well, let me first define what it isn't. You see, a boy is somebody who thinks that the whole world revolves around him. He thinks that everything is for his own good. He thinks that the whole world owes him something and that it's all to come to him. And therefore, we've got a generation of men that grow up with hairy chests but act like boys. We've got grown men sitting still in their Spider-Man pajamas at home, expecting their mum to do the washing. Men are no longer taking hills and winning battles. They're no longer taking risks in the faith. They're no longer rescuing damsels in distress unless it's on their Xbox. God's created us with that sort of passion and that energy and that drive to make a difference. It means that the whole porn industry is kind of about self. It's all about me. It's like all that entertainment. Every relationship, that's why men are fear to commit to relationships, because they're just looking over the shoulder of the girl in front of them, wondering if there's another option coming, because it's all about me. It's immaturity. That's a sign of a boy. Listen, the definition of a man is one who looks for ways to serve, protect, and provide for other people. I had a mate who told me about this bricklayer. And this bricklayer went home and he was fed up of his wife having to go at him when he went home because he just was coming in and put his boots on the table. He bought a house brick home. This is a true story. This is not a joke. This is a true story. He'd come back with a house brick, right? And he put it on the coffee table. And his wife says, "What are you doing?" He says, "Pick that brick up." So she picked the brick up. He says, "Right, put it down here." He put it down here. She goes, "Pick it up. Put it down. Right, now do that 500 times. He says, "There's a bricklayer. That's what I do every day, 500 times. Get my dinner, woman." And there was this sense of, I've gone out, I've done my bit, you do your bit now. I want to call that out as immature and weak. Listen, the bare minimum that a husband does is to go out and work and provide, monies for housekeeping or whatever. We need to be proactively involved in looking after our wives. We need to be proactively involved in raising our kids. We need to be proactively helping around the house as much as possible and serving. We want in church, we want men to be serving right across the board, from the welcome to the creche, to the kids' work, to the worship. We want men to stand up and take responsibility and looking at it as an opportunity to serve, as an opportunity to provide, because it's not all about you, it's about him. And the more that we do that, the more we reflect our Lord Jesus Christ, who laid down everything. He laid down everything so that we could go free. A man is one that's not thinking about what's in it for me. A man is someone that thinks about, how can I serve? How can I provide? How can I protect? As Dan said, Jesus was the only perfect example of manhood. Jesus was the one who was incredibly tender with those who were downtrodden. He was fearlessly confrontational with those that came up and expressed their self-righteousness. He openly wept over broken, sinful situations, and yet was able to go into the temple and kick tables over because they were dishonouring God. He was supremely secure because he heard the voice of the Father right at the beginning before he'd done one miracle or preached one sermon. He followed his Father. He was convinced of his Father's love right the way through to the Garden of Gethsemane, where he says, "Not my will, but yours be done." He trusted his Father even in death. In 1 Timothy 5, it says this. It says, "Do not rebuke an older man harshly, but exhort him as if he were your father. Treat younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, and younger women as sisters with absolute purity." Listen, I am not just rebuking men harshly. If the cap fits, then you need to wear it. And if you feel like I want to be able to help in terms of giving practical ways of being a man in your family, being a good son, being a good brother. But the fact is, this is a family issue. This is the whole church family that is going to raise godly men. And I want to speak particularly to you ladies. You do not realise the power that you have in terms of shaping and moulding and helping men. And the main way that you do it, as Dan already said, is your encouragement. Your encouragement means so much. When you see, those of you that are wives, when you see your husband stepping out and doing something that is really kind of models Jesus, then I want you to encourage it and call it out. Don't immediately jump and try and help them a little bit, how he could have done that a little bit better. Call out encouragement. If you see guys in the church doing stuff that they're really kind of stepping up into their God-given kind of role, then I want you to encourage. It's incredibly powerful. It's like, you know what it's like when you girls, you do this, don't you? When you've got that jar and you just sort of open it a little bit and they go, oh, I can't open it. And then a guy comes along and opens it for you and then he puffs his chest out and walks there. Feels $1 million with that kind of encouragement. Girls, encourage the fellas in the church to be men that run hard after God, that lay their lives down as Jesus lays his life down. I'm going to finish with this. I remember when I was dating Rach, when we was engaged, and I remember we visited her mum's house, and I remember just watching her. We was going out or something, and she was putting on some makeup in the mirror or whatever, and I was looking up at this beauty that I was going to marry. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, she's all mine. She's all mine. And I felt God say to me, no, son, she's all mine. And I can't tell you the kind of strange mix of wonder and terror in that moment when I realised I was dating a daughter of the King. And so I want for that to permeate our relationships when we are dealing with one another. Guys, I want you to look after the daughters of the King. And I just think that when we do those sort of mundane things that in days gone by have traditionally been seen as women's work, or in, you know, when we've had lazy role models growing up ourselves, I want us to step into that. I want us to be different. I want us to, as men, I want us to be those that serve, that look for opportunities to provide and protect. I want us actually as men to submit to the role that God has given us, to be heads of households. I want us to submit to the role that God's given us, to be protectors and providers. Because in so doing, we reflect the only perfect man that ever lived. We reflect Jesus to a needy, weird world that has no clue what this is all about. I'm going to finish there. I'm going to pray and hand over to Fraser. Jesus, I thank you that you knew what you were doing when you fitted us together as men. And Lord, I want, Holy Spirit, for you to be the one doing the convicting now. In all of us as guys, I want to pray that you would, if there's buttons that need pressing, I pray, Holy Spirit, you would be the one that does that. I pray, Jesus, that you would teach us as wives and sisters and mothers and fathers and brothers and sons. I pray that you would teach us as a family to encourage one another, to build one another up, to allow us to make mistakes falling forward, and allow us to emulate and copy from different perspectives the glorious Lord Jesus. And away, Jesus, I'm just so afresh, I'm amazed at your grace, at your mercy, at your patience, at your kindness. When we remember that this day 2,000 years ago, you sat on that donkey and faced, certain death. And you did it for us so that we could be free to reveal you to a broken world. We love you, Jesus. And I pray that we would see many more men joining the church, embracing their masculinity, following Jesus, being the men that you've created us to be.